Brother Cleve Hubbs now, our awesome universe and planet Earth.
Well, you know, there's a popular expression we hear used so often today. Young people like to use it a lot. Awesome. You hear that a lot, don't you? A certain sports car is advertised as awesome, isn't it? You have to kind of agree with that when you look at the sticker price on it. It's awesome. But awesomeness, or to be in awe of something, having amazement, wonder, respect, you know, it's felt often by us when we consider the things made by our grand creator, Jehovah God. Wouldn't you agree? Now, for different ones, it's different things that leave them feeling that way. For some people, it's to gaze at a dynamic sunset. This really does something for them. And others, it's to stand face to face to a large mountain range. It's awesome to them. And for others, I know myself, when I was a young child, looking at an ocean, to contemplate the volume of water there. Awesome. Or maybe you've peered into the Grand Canyon and thought, that's awesome. But you know, years ago, you could have added to that list something else, that of stepping outside in the night sky and gazing and staring at the star-studded sky. Brilliant star-studded sky. It's awesome to look at, to see the universe above us. Yet nowadays, sad to say, many people, even some of the older ones, have never seen this sight. They've never had the chance. And why? Well, because years ago, there wasn't that much to hinder our view of the heavens above. Anyone living a few miles away from the city lights could look up and almost any evening see myriads and myriads of stars. Like in the page here in the book on page 114, that sight there, years ago you could look up and see that most any night. Yet today it's a rare occasion. One of the reasons we have difficulty in seeing that sky that way is, believe it or not, because of city lights. They cast a glare into the heavens. Recently I had the occasion to visit Mount Palomar. And down there they have a sign that's talking about the effects of the city lights of San Diego and Los Angeles. Hundreds of miles apart, but those two cities cast so much light that they can hardly see anymore through that giant telescope. And that's with no pollution. Of course, here in our area, pollution's always a problem, isn't it? And if we step outside or we want to take our children and we want them to see the heavens, it's nearly impossible. We would have to take a trip, probably clear out to Death Valley or clear to Arizona to get a glimpse of the heavens, a clear view of them. But when we do, if we have that occasion and we look at it, it's indeed an awesome sight. Now, those of you who might remember in days past, maybe when you were younger or lived in a different area, when you would be able to see that sight, you remember the things that ran through your mind when you saw those stars up there? You'd ask yourself, you'd say, how far does it reach? Is there an end to it? What's out there? How old is all this? And we used to kid ourselves, and older people used to kid us. We were little. It says, don't think about it. If you stare at it out there, you'll go crazy. It'll just drive you nuts trying to figure out where's the end of all this and where does it go and all this and all that. But even though, you know, today most of us firsthand never get to see that, we're blessed on the other hand because there's tremendous amounts of information being acquired today about the heavens above. Scientists are learning more and more today than ever before, and it's made firsthand available to us through books and school and television. And we're learning vast amounts of the universe, although we never get to see it firsthand. And this all started about 300 years ago, man's enlarging his knowledge of the universe. That was when Galileo first built the first telescope, and he began to see that there was much more out there than met the eye. Well, by the 1920s, men had built great telescopes, such as the one at Palomar and Mount Wilson, and they began to look out into the sky, and they saw things out there that just stunned them, more than anyone had ever imagined could be out there. And we come on up to our day. This year, 1986, the space shuttle is going to put a space telescope out into the distant sky, and they hope with that telescope to be able to maybe peer to the edge of the universe. So I'm sure that when they do, whatever they do find will leave them stunned again as well. But you see, what early astronomers would see when they would look out there, even Galileo, they'd see a star, a bright, sharp star, and alongside of it, a fuzzy pattern. Now, they didn't know exactly what that was. But yet they did know that we ourselves lived in what they called a galaxy, a great cosmic soup of stars, like what you see in that picture or in a clear area that stretches across the night sky. They knew that we were part of millions and millions of stars. And a matter of fact, it was centuries ago that they actually named it the Milky Way. That name is that old. Well, today we know a lot more about the Milky Way that we live in, this galaxy. It's estimated that there may be as many as 10 trillion stars within this Milky Way galaxy. Notice here on page 116 and 117 in your book, we get a first-hand glimpse there of what a galaxy is. Yes, as you can see, they're quite awesome in size, aren't they? Now, you notice the white square there in that picture on the right? That shows an area of the galaxy. And yet our solar system is just a speck inside of that square there. So you can imagine when working with numbers of stars, it's staggering. But do you realize that even more staggering and harder to comprehend is when we start to understand the size of all of this, of the universe. Now, we might try to tell size and distances here on the Earth. We use the term miles per hour, don't we? But if we're to venture out into the universe, even into our solar system, we need to measure distance and speed much faster. That's not miles per hour, but miles per second. And there's very few things that travel at miles per second, except for light. And that's what scientists use, the speed that light travels in 1 second. Of course, that figure, if it means anything to you, is 186,282 miles in a second. Now, you know that's fast, don't you? But do you realize just how fast that is? I'll try to illustrate. If you was to get in your car and drive 55 miles an hour, non-stop around the globe, say there was a highway that would take you non-stop around the globe, at 55 miles an hour, it would take you 19 days to make one revolution. But if you could get in a vehicle that traveled the speed of light, in 1 second you could circle the Earth 7.5 times. That's how fast light travels. Now you might think, well, that's probably, that's pretty sufficient, the speed of light, to measure things out there in the universe. But when we get out into distances like we're going to be talking about, we'll find out that even at the speed of light, it begins to crawl. As a matter of fact, the speed of light even comes to a standstill, practically. And we'll illustrate this now. Now look on page 120 and 21 in your book. Turn over a few pages there, and we see a picture of the solar system. Now keep in mind, this picture is not by any means drawn to scale. If it were drawn to scale, it would stretch clear down the street. That's how much distance there is between the planets. But let's illustrate this by taking an imaginary trip. Let's say we have a vehicle that we'll get into, and it travels at the speed of light. And we're going to leave the Earth and travel out of the solar system and into space. And we're going to see how fast the speed of light is and how far these distances really are. So we rotate around the Earth, and we get warmed up in our vehicle. And let's say we spend about a minute rotating around the Earth, about the time you'd sit at a stoplight before we leave, and then we leave. Well, we've wrapped up 11 million miles in 1 minute. Within 1 second, we streak past the moon. That's all it took, 1 second. If you blink, you probably missed it. It's gone. Then we move on, About 10 minutes go by and we start to approach our first planet, Mars, the red planet. 10 minutes it takes, we reach it, and it's gone. And now things start to slow down a little bit, even at the speed of light. 1 hour elapses, and we come to the planet Jupiter, the giant of the solar system. Another 2 hours, we reach Saturn, the planet with the beautiful rings around it and so forth. Then a total of 3.5 hours elapses. At the speed of light, we reach and pass Uranus, the strange planet that rotates sideways on its axis of all things. 5 hours pass. We're starting to feel a little hungry now. Like to pull over and eat, but we can't. We pass Neptune. That's behind us. Finally, after 7 hours, we pass the little planet, the last one we know of in the solar system, Pluto. It's been a long day on the road. So we've left the solar system, and the nearest thing from here on out, the nearest star, is 17 years away. Well, let's refer back again here to page 117 in our book. Again at the galaxy here. Focus attention on that little white square there. Now, do you realize in all this traveling that we've just described and done here that you couldn't even detect a slight move? Yes, the solar system's in there, but yet it's very small within that square. You see, we're beginning to sense the awesome size of our universe. Well, we're going to continue our journey, and we want to cross this Milky Way galaxy from one end to the other. But it's going to take some time. Just to illustrate that a little bit, now think about, if you look at that square there again, if Adam and Eve, who lived 6,000 years ago, had they boarded that ship and were still alive today, traveling all that time, do you realize that they would have just now, at the speed of light, begin to leave that square? Just left the square. That's how big this Milky Way galaxy is. So if we're going to cross this at the speed of light, hold on to your seats, we're going to take 100,000 years to make it from one side to the other. That's 600 quadrillion miles. Yes, the universe and the galaxies, they're awesome, but remember, these are just specks in the universe. Well, let's turn to page 119. There's a picture of another galaxy. Having crossed our Milky Way galaxy, we're going to set out now for what we call real outer space. And if we look far off, let's say we've crossed our galaxy, and we're out of the Milky Way, and we look far off, we see another fuzzy form. This is it. This galaxy here, you see. This is our nearest neighboring galaxy, the one closest to our galaxy. It's called Andromeda. It, too, has trillions of stars. But we want to reach that, okay? So we're going to set our alarm clocks, because we'll need to wake up sometime about 2,200,000 years from now before we reach that galaxy. How far away they are. Well, do you think now that we have begun to grasp the size of our universe? Not at all. We've only scratched the surface. For as we look around in any direction, let's say we've reached this galaxy, no matter where we look, we see more galaxies, different sizes and shapes and characteristics. Scientists tell us that there may be even more, but there's 100 billion such galaxies. Now, these aren't just scattered haphazardly all over space either. Scientists know that they move in an orderly fashion. They're organized into what they call clusters, like clusters of grapes on a grapevine. And they're in precision and in motion. Now, there are small clusters and big clusters, but they're all over the place. And so now, let's say we've traveled from one galaxy to the next, and let's say, well, we want to leave this cluster of galaxies that are all around. We want to travel from one end of it to the other and leave it. How long will that take? Well, once again, in our vehicle, it'll take, at the speed of light, 40 million light years to leave this cluster of galaxies. But there's still more. After we finally would escape the dimensions of this cluster of galaxies we've talked about, we realize after leaving it, we see another cluster of galaxies over there. and over here and all around. And we learned that there are what's called superclusters. In other words, these clusters are made up of clusters, like grapes on a vine, many grapes, clusters of grapes, all making one grapevine plant. One giant supercluster. Now, these are about 10 times bigger than the regular clusters. And let's say we want to travel across one of these, pass through and go from one end to the other of it. How long will that take? At the speed of light, it'll take 400 million light years to cross that supercluster. Now, beyond the superclusters, if we could ever cross one, scientists have peered out with the most powerful telescopes, and believe it or not, they've discerned, they've seen that beyond that in distance there are more superclusters. Now, if we were to venture to try to reach a supercluster, leaving our own to the next one, it would take us at the speed of light 5 billion light years to reach the next supercluster. Yet scientists know that the universe is bigger yet. Bigger yet. Yes, because beyond what the ordinary telescopes see, scientists use radio astronomy, picking up radio waves. And they feed these into computers and electronic instruments and to detect things that are way out there. Matter of fact, they've estimated that as far as they can see now, it could be anywhere from 15 to 20 billion light years, the edge of the universe. But you know, this is only the end of man's ability to see that. By no means that's the end, does it? It could be even farther. So when you think about the awesomeness of our universe, open your Bibles to Isaiah 40:12. When you think of the awesomeness of our universe, how do you think that Jehovah compares to all this? How does he stand in contrast to this enormous thing, our universe? Well, notice verse 12 of Isaiah 40. It says, "Who has measured the waters in the mere hollow of his hand?" And then notice it says, "And taken the proportions of the heavens themselves with a mere span." Now what that's saying is that from his thumb to his finger, the entire universe is just like that in Jehovah's hand. It's nothing. And that's why David said it was the work of Jehovah's fingers, the heavens are declaring. But you see, beyond the size of the universe, astronomers are stimulated by something else, impressed. It's when they look at the orderliness, precision, movement of all these bodies, and they have to agree that there must be some intelligence behind such organization as they find. Yet our universe is more than just the outer space that we see. No, men have been left stunned from taking a look inward as well. Refer again to page 121 there of our solar system, and there's another picture in comparison to the solar system there. You see, just as our solar system is organized with orbits of planets and so forth around the sun with perfect accuracy, we also find a similar pattern in the way the infinitesimal universe, the world of the small worlds. With very powerful microscopes, men have been able to look into the world of the small. Once they saw the molecules and they knew atoms were there, but they couldn't see them. Now with electronic microscopes, perhaps I think it's billions of times they magnify, they can see the atom. And what they've seen when they took a look at the atom was marvelous. They noticed that it was much like the solar system. It has a nucleus center, like our sun, made up of neutrons and protons. And then like planets orbiting around it were the electrons, little particles spinning around it, just like a miniature solar system. Well, they find that everything in the universe is composed and made up from these little bodies, these little solar systems. And by changing the total number of the protons and the neutrons and the arrangement of these electrons, it makes up like building blocks for the universe. You stack 1, you get something, 2, you get something, 3, 4, and 5, and so on. Everything in the universe is made up of these. For instance, if you take 78 of these building blocks and put them together, it's platinum. Now, you add one more building block, instantly you've got gold. You add one more building block, you've got the substance mercury. Add 2 more, you got lead. But it goes that way all the way from 1 to up past 100. Every element, everything we know in the universe is made of these building blocks either by adding or subtracting 1. Now that's order. That isn't haphazardly done, for sure. So the more scientists study the universe, the more they marvel at it. They just keep finding more aspects of order the closer they look. They've even coined a new term they use. It's called the cosmos. What it is, that means an orderly, harmonious, systematic universe. Now, all of the precision and design and organization that they've labeled as cosmos would certainly have to be possessed by an intelligent mind, personality. Well, we can agree to that, can't we? Just look around you. Your experience in life tells you that whenever you see anything, a pencil and paper, a machine, a car, a road, you reason that somebody put that together, that somebody made it. Well, what about our far more complex universe? Doesn't it tell us that too? One aspect of all that is the laws, because in addition to all the orderliness of it all, this fact stands out boldly. It's the physical laws that govern things in the universe. Everything from those super clusters of galaxies down to the tiny atom are governed by laws. But they're different laws. Now, some might think that these physical laws just came about by accident or randomly. For instance, like when you're going down a road and a tree falls across the road, it prohibits you from going any farther. Now, that's a random law. But is it like that? No, not at all. Notice in your book on page 123, in paragraph 17, what this physicist, Stephen Hawking, had to say. He says, the more we examine the universe, we find it is not arbitrary at all, but obeys certain well-defined laws that operate in different areas. It seems very reasonable to suppose that there may be some unifying principles so that all laws are part of some bigger laws. Well, that's interesting because, you know, Albert Einstein, to his dying day, he's the one that had the famous theory of relativity. He worked to try to prove that very thing, that there was something connecting all the laws together. The law of gravity, electricity, thermodynamics, and the nuclear laws. He's seen even though they're all different, they don't conflict with one another. They all work in harmony together in the universe. So these laws tell us something, don't they? When we see that orderliness, just like when you see a traffic signal or something, you reason somebody put that there. Somebody thought it out that a signal was needed at that intersection and so forth. Well, the laws of the universe work the same way. They tell us the same thing. And scientists are constantly discovering that very fact, that someone had to conceive these intelligent laws. Of course, these cosmologists, these ones who study the universe, these kind of things are kind of disturbing to them because the only answer to why it could be that way is that God did it. And yet they don't want to admit it. But with their backs to the wall, they'll say, well, it was no accident, I guess. But beyond all the knowledge of what's here and how it behaves and all that, there's another question that's even deeper that scientists really have to grapple with. And that's when they try to sit down and figure out, where did all the matter in the universe come from? Boy, that's something. They just can't begin to deal with it. Now, Carl Sagan, a famous astronomer, he notes, once there was nothing. He says there was no galaxy, stars, planets. What we see today in the cosmos is a result from some awesome transformation of matter and energy. He's saying that something made it all, that it came from somewhere. Well, Einstein developed his famous formula of E equals mc squared, which led to the atomic bomb. In other words, he proved that if you take an atom, it's this piece of matter, and you break it open, that tremendous energy escapes. Well, also vice versa is true. That formula proved that energy in turn can produce matter. So with that theory being proven, we wonder, where could enough energy come from to produce all those galaxies and superclusters or everything we see? Where could such energy come from? Well, the Bible gives us the answer. If we look there in Isaiah 40:26, I'll just quote it. It says, due to the abundance of dynamic energy, he also being vigorous in power, Not one of the heavenly bodies is missing. So what does that tell us? The fact that he made it, he had the energy to make it, and he controls it. Today, most all the scientists have the theory of the Big Bang. They all agree that there was a moment of creation. Well, we can buy that as Christians. They can tell you everything that happened after that Big Bang, but one thing they can't tell you is what happened before the Big Bang. When was that instant of creation? How did that come about? See, it's an astounding mystery to them. Most won't attribute it to God, rather they claim it was some sort of an accident, like a chaotic explosion that just blew everything into place. We can't buy that, can we? Have you ever seen an explosion create anything, that alone? The universe, as we've been talking about? Not at all. So you see, while the evolution theory leaves us no better off in coming to grips with these answers than from the beginning, we find the Bible does. God's Word, the Bible, comes to grips simply, understandably. It even agrees with good science, sound science. It's what we call true science. And so then I'm sure you would agree with the psalmist here. After a consideration of the universe, what he had to say in Psalms 19:1, and this was back in the time before they had the knowledge we have today, he said, "The heavens are declaring the glory of God, and the work of his hands, the expanse, is telling." The Bible tells us the way it happened. There's the evidence right there. Well, after contemplating the size of the whole universe with its many sights that just leave us stunned, could you believe that there's something even grander within it than all the rest of it by itself? Yes, there is, right there in the center of all of it. You see, scientists have found that the universe really actually hasn't got a center. It's more or less like a balloon expanding. So, you know, if you was on a balloon, no matter where you were, you'd be in the center of it, wouldn't you? So the earth relatively is in the center. And we find that Jehovah has focused even greater creative attention to it than anywhere else in the universe. Look at the picture on page 129 there of our earth. Now, wouldn't you say it's absolutely gorgeous? Beautiful, isn't it? Like a jewel, like a beautiful jewel set there just hanging from nothing. Can you imagine the impact it must have had on those people in the shuttle, those astronauts, to see this picture live with their naked eye? I mean, it would be something that would stay with you the rest of your life. Well, if you look at it, it's certainly not hard to tell that God intended for that to be a paradise. It certainly isn't hard to tell that it's teeming with life, is it? Most evident. But you know, just as the deeper that men look into space, they keep learning and learning more and more. It's the same thing when they take a look closer at this little jewel, the earth. I'd like to read what the book has to say there on page 129 in paragraph 2 in regard to the earth. It says, "It is much more than just beautiful. The greatest of all cosmological scientific puzzles, confounding all our efforts to comprehend it, is the earth. We are only now beginning to appreciate how strange and splendid it is, how it catches the breath, the loveliest object afloat around the sun, enclosed in its own blue bubble of atmosphere, manufacturing and breathing its own oxygen, fixing its own nitrogen from the air into its own soil, and generating its own weather." So you see, nowhere else out there in space have men found any life like this. And yet here it is, just teeming with it, overflowing with it. There are organisms, insects, plants, there's fish, birds, animals, and yes, humans. You see, yes, in all the universe, the earth is definitely unique. Well, we can say unique because, let's say if you'd been back there on that little space vehicle that we were describing and traveling around, and here you'd traveled for billions of years and you'd seen trillions of planets, and then you landed on Earth. Could you help when you got out of that vehicle but to say, who put all this here? Where did it come from? You couldn't help but exclaim such a statement. It's just like finding out in the Sahara Desert a dream home. Television and stereo and air conditioning and all the comforts you could imagine, and then to reason that, well, a few 100,000 dust storms just blew the elements together, and one day there it was. No, the Bible reasons at Hebrew 3:4 that every house is constructed by someone, but he who constructed all things is God. Well, we know that in a house there's very complex systems for the plumbing, the electricity, and air conditioning and whatnot. But you see, in the earth, the systems are more complex than any house anyone has ever built. What a difference then. Well, just as there's a lot of preparation when someone's going to build a house, they think about where they're going to locate it and get the property and all that, and the materials, where they'll buy them, what it'll look like, the blueprint. Scientists have detected also how the universe, it seemed to behave as if in consideration, everything in consideration of the planet Earth. And notice this point as it's brought out here in paragraph 6 of 131, page 131. It says, as we look out into the universe and identify the many accidents of physics and astronomy that have worked together to our benefit, it almost seems as if the universe must in some sense have known we were coming. So you see, indeed, because Jehovah was preparing for the earth long ago, all his creations were to culminate in building the inhabited earth, just like that picture shows there. So this is evident from when we think of the placement of the earth. Look at the picture on 131. You see how that shows the earth circling the sun there. It's situated in such a way to where it gets just the right amount of light and heat to sustain life. Do you realize that just a small shift in that setting would mean drastic changes? Things would either freeze or completely shrivel and dry up just in a slight move. And yet as the earth orbits the sun once a year, it keeps just right because it's spinning around the sun at 66,000 miles an hour, just right to keep it right in perfect orbit. And just right to offset the gravitational pull of the sun. Perfect alignment. And just think about how the days are divided in half as the earth rotates every 24 hours. Just right in harmony with your needs for rest and sleep. All that pointing to someone who cared. You notice on the picture on page 132 and 33 there's still another factor of the earth's positioning that is marvelous. Not only is it all these other things, the right distance and the days, 24 hours and all that, but for some reason it's tilted at 23.5 degrees. Well, we know that wouldn't be life or death. It wouldn't end life on earth if it wasn't, but it does show wisdom. It shows someone making more versatile use of the surface of the earth. Because by it tilting to the shifts that we see there, it allows for crops and variety to be grown all over the earth. So there's a variety of food in all areas. And then we have the variety of those 4 seasons that you see displayed there in the book. Each one with its own distinctive feature to appreciate. Perhaps one or two of them are your favorites. Don't you detect from looking at this beautiful picture of the seasons that personal touch from God? Certainly. Well, you know, looking at these beautiful scenes makes me think of how people will drive hundreds of miles and to go to some place like that, and they jump out of their car, and the first thing they do is take a big, deep breath of that fresh, clean air. Well, you know, today it's kind of hard to find those places. But even though that they're hard to find, we can still give credit to Jehovah for the fact that we can even breathe because of the fact that he's enveloped the earth with its special atmosphere. You could easily take that for granted if you never had it cut off because, well, breathing is one of the most normal, natural things we do. We do it while we're asleep. It's invisible. You can't see it, yet it's not insignificant. It's very vital. It's a substance that's only found here on the earth. You know, because without it, it was one of the most perplexing problems that the astronauts had. Trying to get men out into space was to find a spacesuit that they could have an environment to live in. Even now they mass produce them, but each one of those spacesuits costs millions of dollars to make. But the atmosphere, it's very interesting. If you look here on page 134, actually, did you know that the air that we breathe isn't just oxygen, as you might think? Really, only a very small part of what you breathe is oxygen, about 21%. That's all, for a very good reason. Because, believe it or not, besides the smog that we breathe from day to day around here, Every time you take a breath of oxygen, you're breathing in a poisonous gas. That's right. Of course, you have to have it, you have to breathe it, but too much of it is toxic. It will kill you. So then why didn't Jehovah just create us with to breathe straight oxygen? Why didn't he just make us that way? Well, you know, oxygen is a very flammable substance. And if he had done that, why, things would be catching on fire every time he turned around. And you'd never get the thing put out. It'd be completely out of control. So 78% of the air is diluted with nitrogen, which is also a type of a fertilizer when it's combined together with the oxygen. You see, that's what happens when after a thunderstorm, you see the lightning up there striking the thunderclouds and all that. And then it rains, and then the next day or so, the sun pops out. And have you ever noticed those bright green shoots of grass and stuff come up? You couldn't get that result with your garden hose. It's because the nitrogen in the rain has fertilized the ground. Well, there's another 1% of the atmosphere that's made up of other gases like carbon dioxide. Now, don't confuse that with carbon monoxide like comes out the tailpipe of your car. Carbon dioxide. Now, this is the gas that we exhale, us and animals, after breathing in oxygen. Now, you might wonder if all the people who have ever lived and continue to live are always exhaling carbon dioxide all the time. Why doesn't that throw that out of balance? How come we don't run out of fresh air to breathe? And why doesn't that 1% of carbon dioxide exceed 1%? Well, you know, in recent years, that's why there's been such a great concern by city planners about putting more greenery around. They realize that they need that greenery because, you see, plants, they utilize carbon dioxide. They need it because they take it in and in turn they give off oxygen. This is a marvelous arrangement from Jehovah God. He set it as a pattern, a cycle, to keep us breathing and all living things alive on the earth. Yet there's much more to appreciate about the atmosphere. About 15 miles out, there's a real thin layer of gas called the ozone. You remember they were telling us about the spray cans some years ago, not to use them. They thought they'd destroy it. This is a filter to cosmic radiation. It's very damaging to life. So if you've ever seen a picture of the moon, well, you know, one of the highlights when they look at the moon is to see all those craters out there because they've been bombarded by meteors. Not much atmosphere there. Of course, that very seldom happens to the Earth, does it? Because the radiation or the atmosphere burns that up. That's why that shooting stars, you ever been out at night and you see a shooting star and you try to tell your companion about it and you go, look, there's a shooting, it's gone. You didn't even have a chance to point it out to him because that fast it's burned up. So this shell also keeps the temperatures on the Earth level as well. It keeps the warmth from escaping. Because you see, if there wasn't the atmosphere to hold it there, do you realize that even on a hot summer night, that as the Earth turned, if there was no atmosphere to hold it in, that things would drop below freezing just overnight? That's right. So you see, these are things that Jehovah's put together there to keep life uniform and safe here for us. You might wonder, why doesn't the atmosphere escape? Well, it's because of gravity. The gravity holds the atmosphere, and that holds the temperature in. And this gravity is just right. It's just strong enough to hold the atmosphere in and everything, and yet it's not too restrictive. Still, some of these athletes can pole vault 19 feet into the air. So I guess it's not too hard on us if they can do that, is it? But just like all things that Jehovah's made, they're not only wisely made and functional, but isn't it true that when we look at his creations, they're exceedingly beautiful? As the many colorful panoramic skies testify to, sunsets. See, this atmosphere, it's a unique gift from Jehovah. It's like a present gift wrapped in a beautiful blue and red and purple, yellow. It's a gift from him for our life. Well, our next look at this most remarkable place in the universe is towards something that is visible to the eye. You can't very easily overlook it. It's water. And you notice there back on that first page we looked at on 128 of the earth, there's water everywhere. Some people might even think there's too much of it. Well, there's not. We all seem to understand how much we need it. It's vital, not only for just drinking, but for many other things. Some people don't really ever stop to think what a versatile substance water is. Because of its unique qualities, it's used in thousands of things. And you've heard the expression, just add water And so it's true. Just think of something about water, the strange chemical it is, how in just a short temperature range it's found on the earth that it can be a solid, froze like ice, it can be a liquid as water, or it can turn into a gas, a vapor, as it evaporates. It's also a wonderful catalyst. It can carry minerals and nutrients into the blood of creatures or into sap of plants and trees. How else could we ever extract these nutrients from the soil and from solids? See, water can dissolve more substances than anything else. It's very thin substance. Notice the picture on page 138 now. Some interesting things happen to water when it freezes. For instance, in a body of water like a sea or lake, when it starts to get cold, the temperatures start to get cool, the cold water will begin to sink and the warm water will begin to rise. But, now this goes along with the usual laws of thermodynamics, but something amazing happens when that water reaches the freezing point. The whole process reverses. Who knows why? Jehovah did it. And the cold water becomes lighter and rises till finally the body of water freezes on the top and the cool water is trapped on the bottom. Now here's evidence, surely, of a loving Creator. He had in mind those living creatures that live down there in the bottom. And also, did you ever stop to think about this? If that cold water didn't rise and the warm water go down, that if you went up to here to Big Bear Lake in the summertime, if that didn't happen, that would be froze all the time, because the cold water would go to the bottom and the sun's rays would never melt it, and it would just stay frozen on the bottom all the time. So it was necessary, wasn't it? But yet, it's an exception to the rule, and only God could make that exception. Now, because water is also a gas or a vapor, as you've seen on a hot day, you throw some water on the driveway, how it just disappears? It's evaporating. Now, that is useful because it can cause water to be distributed everywhere where there's no rivers or ponds or irrigation, because it condenses into raindrops in the sky and then in turn falls back to the earth gently, so that the water is distributed and waters everything on the earth. Well, finally, let's consider the lowly substance dirt, more appropriately called soil, or the productive land. It's more than just dirt, as we say, because there's great evidence in wisdom in its makeup as well. Neatly stored in the soil are the basic materials for thousands of plants, varieties of living things. There's millions of different organisms in the soil that are working very hard. They decompose and break down and convert waste back into materials and useful minerals. And if something damaging happens to the earth, like a catastrophe at Mount St. Helens, in no time at all, it starts to reverse it all back, and things go back to normal. And then on the top of the land, there are these marvelous little factories called plants. These combine the water and the nutrients with the carbon dioxide and the sunlight, not only into just food do they make, but into delicious treats to our tongue. Now look at the picture on page 141 there of that setting of fruit. Some accident, huh? Well, as you look at it, ask yourself, if this is evolution, why was evolution so concerned to sculpture, design, and give these such delightful colors and to make them appeasing to us? And why was evolution so considerate to change the taste of these from that of dirt, where they come, into the wild, bursting flavors we know that when we taste a lemon, a tangerine, a cherry, a nectarine, a watermelon, and so forth. Did you know there's 216 types of fruit? How many of you tried? Evidence of a loving God. So evolution or creation, really, how does the evidence stack up to you? Right down to the atom, a tiny universe in itself. Is that chance? And that midway in all of this, we find the earth rotating on its axis, just the right distance from the sun, and all of that, compounded to compound the formula, it's at 23.5 degrees. Do you think that that's chance again? Or what about the atmosphere, the soil, the water, the plants? Each of these an amazing function by themselves, and yet all working together in harmony and to the benefit of you and I. With this evidence of concern, care, thoughtfulness, and really love at every turn, could this be the result of the cold, impersonal, a strange theory, not fact, but theory of evolution? Hardly. That's why it's been the hope of those who published this book that this third in a series of talks would really help you to appreciate the battle that goes on between evolution and creation. And I think it would help you to share the feelings, too, of the angel who was talking to the Apostle John here at Revelation 14:7. Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of judgment by him has arrived. And so worship the one who made the heavens and the earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. Certainly we can do that.